Hey guys, in this video we are going to create our Markdown content and we are going to upload them to our Mongodb database. In the previous video we have created our whole front end of the application. In case if you haven't seen it, I will put the link on the description. Please check that out. Alright, now I'm going to set up our Mongodb database on Mongodb Atlas. Mongodb Atlas is a cloud database system for MongoDB. First of all, go to cloud.mongodb.com, then create an account if you haven't any, or if you have any, just sign in. So after you have signed in, or if you have created an account, just find a button to create any organization. So I will click on this. Actually, let me just zoom it for you. Okay, that's fine. So I will create new organization. Give your organization a name. I'm going to call it Cules-YT. Then everything's fine. Just click on next. And add members and set permissions. I don't want any members. So create organization. Alright, now we need to create our project. So new project. The project name will be Cules blog-YT. Click next and add members and set permissions. No, so create project. And now we need to create our cluster. So build a cluster. Now MongoDB is asking us to choose a plan. We are going for free, so create a cluster. Now choose your nearest region and the cloud provider. Then cluster type. You can customize your cluster name, so I don't want it. I will call it Cules blog. Okay, so this is my cluster name. And this is one time only. Once your cluster is created, you cannot change it again. So create cluster. Alright, MongoDB is creating our cluster now. It will take about 1 to 3 minutes. And another thing that is, we don't need the .env library. I mistakenly added that. So we can just delete it. My mistake. Okay. So save the package.json. So just type yarn install to really remove the .env package. Alright, the .env package has been removed and our cluster has been created. So just go to collections. I would like to add my own data. So create a database. I'm going to call it blocks. And the collection name will also be blocks. So create. Alright, so let's go back again. Now click connect. And Mongoose will ask you for IP address. You can add your current IP address, a different IP address, or allow access from anywhere. For simplicity, I will just click on allow access from anywhere. And you can put a description if you want. Then add. And you have to create a database user. I'm gonna give my name. Then a super secure password. Now create database user. And choose a connection method. Connect your application. And make sure you have the Node.js driver and the version is the latest one. And just copy the whole string. Now we need to store this connection string in the environment variable. Now I need to store the connection string on an environment variable. So I will create a file on the root of our project. It will be called .env.local. It has to be .env.local. It is for Nextjs. So let's open that up. Now to create our environment variable, just type the variable name. I will call it Mongo URI. Now the common convention is to use underscores instead of space and make the all letter uppercase. Okay, you don't have to follow this, but it is common convention. And then an equal sign and paste your connection string. Alright, so this is our connection string. Now I need to remove this password and insert our database password, not the account password. And we have to replace the my first database word with the first database that we have created. So the first database name is blogs, and the password, I will give my password. Okay, so we don't need to do anything with this file now. Let's just save and quit. Now we need to create a file which will connect our application with MongoDB database. So inside the source, I'm going to create a directory. It will be called mongoose. And inside the mongoose, I'm going to create a file, connectdb.js. Now I'm just going to copy paste the code. You can copy paste it from my repository. That's all we need. Basically, it's just pulling out the Mongo URI variable from process.env. If the Mongo URI variable does not exist, then we want to throw an error. Then it will create a function dbconnect, and we are going to export it. And where we want to create a connection with our MongoDB database, we just need to call this function. Okay, so let's just save it. Now I'm going to create our model files. But before that, I want to clear some concept of MongoDB in case if you don't know. You can skip this section. I will put the timestamps too. Okay, so what is a document? A document is simply kind of like JSON file. In JSON, we store our data in a key value pair, and we also do the same thing in document. We store our data in a key value pairs. We can also nest our data with object and arrays. Okay, so that's what a document is. So what is a collection? A collection is simply an array of documents. And what is a database? A database is simply an array of collections. Okay, so what is a model? A model is simply an object which has some properties and methods. And with those methods, we can operate some operations on a specific collections. For example, if we create a blog model, we can only operate some operations on the blogs collection. And if we create a profile model, we can only do the operation on profile collection. And what is a schema? A schema is simply the structure of a document. For example, in schema, we specify what properties are going to be inside a document. Are they going to be required or not? What type of value it will store, and so on. Okay, so these are the concepts that you need to know if you don't know about MongoDB at all. Okay, so let's get back to the editor. So inside the mongoose directory, I'm going to create another file. It will be called blog model.js. I need to import 3 things from mongoose. So import from mongoose. I need to import the schema constructor, then the model function, and the models object, which will store all of the available model. Now let's create our schema. Const schema. It will be new schema, and new schema takes a parameter which is an object, and inside the object we have to specify our properties and their options. So the first property that I want is the title, which will be an object. Actually, every single property will be an object inside the schema object. So we have to specify the type. So type, and the type is string, and the string has to be uppercase S. It is the string constructor. And we also want the title to be required, so required to true. By default it is false. Next I want the slug, and the slug will be the same type as the title is. So what I'm going to do is I will create a variable and store this object. So const required string type, it will be equals to this object. So I will pass the required string type, and also for the slug, required string type. Next I want a description. It will also be string type and required. Then I want banner, which will be the image path of the banner. It will also be required string type. We want an alt text for our image, required string type. We want a content. It will be also required string type. We also want a reading time, and again required string type. There will be a comma, and I also need a custom ID field, custom ID, to identify a blog. So it will be also required string type, then created at, it will be type date. I don't want to be required, I want to set our default value, so default will be date.now. So when we will create our document, we don't need to specify the created at field. Mongoose will set our default value to the created at field, and which will be current date. Then I want a total views for building the real-time view counter. It will be type number, and by default it will be 0. Okay, so let's just format the code. Now we need to create a model out of the schema. So I will export a model, export default, but first I need to check if the blog model really exists or not. To check, we are going to use the models object, which will store all of the available models. So models dot blog. So if models.blog exists, then export it. If that does not exist, then create a new model. So model, which is a function, and as the first argument we need to specify our model name. Our model name is blog, and second argument will be the schema. Okay, so that's what we want. Let's just save the file. Okay, so now I'm going to create our markdown files. So inside the source folder, I'm going to create another directory. It will be called blogs. And inside the blogs directory, I'm going to store all of my markdown files. Actually, I'm not going to use vanilla markdown. I'm going to use MDX. Now, MDX is markdown with JSX. And you've heard me right. You can write JSX inside markdown. And JSX is simply JavaScript. You can write any kind of JavaScript expression. You can create component. You can import any kind of component. You can export component, and a lot of cool stuff. And it is super fast and customizable. I would recommend you to visit mdxjs.com and read some of its documentation. So inside the blocks, I'm going to create MDX files. Now the file name has to be a little bit different. The file name that I'm going to use will be used as the slug for the blog page. So the way I'm going to write the file name is all letters should be lowercase, and so instead of spaces, we are going to use dashes. So for example, I want the file name to be what is css in js.mdx. So the file name should be what dash is dash css dash in dash js.mdx. Okay, so let's create one. And inside the file, you can create any kind of markdown content, but I'm not going to bother about it. I'm going to create the metadata for our markdown files. To do that, we're going to use front matter. And to parse the front matter, we are going to use gray matter. Gray matter is a library that parses front matter metadata. And the way we write our front matter is in this way. We write them in a key value pair way, and then we wrap up the data by 3 dashes. 3 dashes to the top and 3 dashes to the bottom. Then we create whatever markdown content we want. So first we're going to parse the markdown file with Node.js fs module. Then we're going to pass the parsed markdown data to gray matter function. And that gray matter function will return us an object, and that object has a content property, and the content property will be a string which will hold the original markdown content. And we're going to have a data object, and the data object will store all of our front matter metadata. So this is the GitHub page. I will put the link on the description. Okay, so let's create our front matter data. So 3 dashes to the top and 3 dashes to the bottom. And I don't want to bore you by typing those, so I will just paste it here. So these are the data that I want. First one is the title, then the description and the banner, and banner property will hold the image path of our banner. It will be inside the public folder, then blogs, then the blog directory, and the directory name will be the same as the file name, blog file name, and then banner.png, and an alt text for our banner, and a custom ID to identify a specific document in our database. And you can put whatever markdown content you want. So what I'm going to do is I will paste 5 blogs and their banners inside the project. You will find them at the repository. You can use them only for your practice. Don't use it for other purposes. So as you can see that I have pasted 5 MDX files and their images. So now I will just parse the MDX files and will upload them to our MongoDB database. Now I want the home page to be a static page. To create a static page, we want to export a function from the page which is called GetStaticProps. The GetStaticProps function will only run once at build time, and it will never run again. And it is also runs on server side instead of client side. And in that function, we need to parse our data and upload them to the database. So let's do that. So let's open up the index.js file. So from this file, we need to export the function. So export const GetStaticProps. I also want it to be async because we are going to do async operations. So first of all, I need to get the root of our project. So const root, so process.cwd, and it will give us the root of our project. Now I want to read the blogs directory, so we need to import some modules from Node.js. So import fs from fs, which means file system. I also need path module from path. So fs.read_sync. It will take an argument, which is the path to the directory. Now you can just pass the path like src/blogs and so on, but this path won't work on Windows file systems. Unix file systems use forward slashes, but Windows systems use backslashes. So on Windows it won't work. That's why we have imported the path module. Path module will handle that for us. So path.join. Now join method will multiple string arguments, and path.join will add those arguments and will return us a new path. So first I want to pass root, then src, then blocks. It will read all of our file, not the actual file data, but the file names, and will return them as an array. So const all blog file names, and now I want to read all of the files one by one. So all blog file names dot map, and it will take a callback function. File name will be the first argument. So in here I need to read the actual content of the file. So fs.read file sync. Again I also need to give the path. So path.join, first root, then src, then blocks, and then the actual file name. And as the second argument we need to pass utf-8. So it will return us a string. So const file data, and now we need to parse the file data with gray matter function to get our front matter and the actual content. So let's import that. Import matter from gray matter. So let's call the matter function and pass the file data, and it will return us an object. Let's store that matter data. You might have remembered that it will have a data object which will store all of our front matter data, but I also want to add the slug inside the data. So let's get the slug, const slug. So file name dot replace. I want to replace the file extension, which is .mdx, with a empty string. So first I want to remove mdx, and as a second argument I want to replace the extension with an empty string. It will remove that. So I will destructure the data from metadata, and then data.slug will be the slug. And finally I want to return the all metadata. Now we know that map returns a array which stores the return values, so it will return us an array of metadata. So const file datas, and it will store that array. Now we need to upload them to our database. I will do it one by one. So let's just format the code a bit. Okay, now I need to import the connectdb function and blog model. So import connectdb from /mongo/connectdb, and also the blog model from blog model. Now let's call the connectdb method. So connectdb MongoDB, and it will return us an promise, so we need to await this. Actually, I have a typo, it should be capital B. So I will just loop over the file datas array and will upload the data to the database one by one. File datas dot map. It will take a file data as the argument for the callback. So blog model, and I want to use update one method. With update one, MongoDB will find a document, then it will update that. Now why update one method? Because we want to update our data that are already present on our database with our latest data. If we use create, then it will just create a new document every time we build our application, and we will end up having a lot of duplicate data, and we don't want that. That's why we are using update one. And this is the update one documentation. It will take a filter object. It will be used to find a specific document for us. Then it will take an updated parameter, which has to be an object or an array, and we can also pass some options. So first, pass the filter object. I want to give the custom ID field, custom ID. Actually, let's just destructure the file data first. So const data and content from file data. So in the filter object, I want to check for a custom ID that matches with data.custom ID. So basically we are saying to MongoDB that find a document that has a custom ID field which matches with our data.custom ID. So next, our update object. So if MongoDB finds a document, then we want to set some data to that document. So we need to use an operator of MongoDB. So give $, then set. It is called set operator, and it will also be an object. And inside the object, we need to specify the properties and their values that we want to update. So I will spread the data object and will pass the content. Then I also want a reading time property. To get the reading time, we need to use the reading time library, which we have already installed. So import reading time from reading time. So we will call the reading time and pass our content, which will give us an object, and that object has a text property, and it is the only property that we want. For the third argument of the update one, we can pass some options in an object. So if I go to the documentation, we have some options. We want the absurd options, and by default it is false. And if this option is true and no document is found, then MongoDB will insert a new document. So when we will create a new MDX file, that means we have created a new block. So when update one will run, MongoDB won't find any document because it hasn't been uploaded yet. So we want to create a new document instead. So absurd true. And another option that I want to give is set defaults on insert. I want to set it to true. That means when we will create a new document, if any of the properties that is included in the blog model but is not specified in the set object, but we want to include that in the document. So if I show you the blog model actually, so as you can see that inside the created at field, it is not actually required, but it has a default value. And we also haven't specified the created field in our set object. So MongoDB will just create a new document and will also include the created field, and the value will be the default one. So let's just format this code. Update one function will return us an promise, but I don't want to resolve it here. I want to return that from the map function. So return, and this map function will return us an array of promises. So let's store that. Const update blog promise, and we need to resolve the array of promises. So we need to use the promise constructor, promise.all, and we need to pass the array update block promise, and we also need to await this. So let's just save the file and let's see if we have any error. That seems fine. So let's just run the server and see if our data has been uploaded or not. Okay, we have a error that cannot resolve reading time. My mistake. So the reading time will not be a camel case. It will have a dash and lowercase t. And also we need to return an object from the GetStaticProps function. So return object, which will have a props property, and it will also be an object, and this props object will be passed to the page component, this one. Okay, so let's try it again. I will save the file. So as you can see, we don't have any warning. Actually we have one. So let's just go to the MongoDB Atlas and see if our data has been uploaded or not. Alright, if I go to collections, I should have 5 documents. Alright guys, we have 5 documents. As you can see, it has custom ID, banner, content, created at date, reading time, 6-minute read, slug, title, total views. So everything that we need. So we have successfully uploaded our data to the database. So let's just recap what we have done in this video. First, we have created our Markdown files, actually MDX files. We have also created the front matter metadata for the blog. Then we are using a GetStaticProps function from the index.js file, which actually runs only once at build time from server side. Then we parse our blogs directory and get our file names. Then we read our blog files, actually MDX files. Then we also parse our metadata with gray matter, and we also get the slug from the file name. We add the slug to the data and we return our metadata from the map function. So the file data's variable is just an array of metadata. Then we loop over the file datas again and upload our data one by one to the database. So we destructure our data and content from file data. Then we use blog model.updateOne to update our data to the database. We pass a query object. We ask MongoDB to find a document that has a custom ID that matches with our data.custom ID. We also want to set an object which will have all of our metadata, content, and our reading time. We want to set this data to the document. And for options, if no document has been found, then we want to create one. We also want to add the properties that has some default values but is not included in the set object. And blog model.updateOne returns us a promise, so we return that to the map function. So update block promise is just an array of promises. Then we resolve that array of promises with promise.all. And finally, from the GetStaticProps function, we return an object which has a prop object. Okay, so that's a lot of work. I hope this makes sense to you. So if you have any question, feel free to comment down below. You can also reach out to me at any social media as thatonjon. I also post content there. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe to my channel. It takes a lot of effort to create this kind of video and edit them. It really motivates me to create more content like this. So that's it for today. I will see you in the next video where we will generate our static pages with Nextjs. So I will see you on the next video. Until then, stay safe. Goodbye.